Hey,
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, man. You?
Doing pretty good. Good. Semester is almost over. The final stretch.
You are my second victim in my YouTube channel that I'm talking in English with.
Oh, is that right? Who was the first?
Some Chinese guy from my dorm, and the podcast was about severe and chronic depression.
There you go.
Wait,
I can't shed any light on that, so we'll probably cover different topics.
wait,
How's
I'm.
it being back in Turkey?
Oh, it sucks. It definitely sucks.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm teaching piano right now in a really small music school. I'm actually doing good, like financially and mentally. I don't know if you were aware of my situation in New York.
Vaguely. I know
I mean,
everything.
it was, yeah. It was all about money and me looking for jobs and trying to catch up with all the classes, composing and piano.
That's a lot, especially if you're on a visa. It complicates everything too. So
Yeah.
I'm lucky I don't have to worry about that.
And like, until, no, it's fine. And during that time, Trump got elected.
Yeah, yeah, you honestly picked not a bad time to leave. It could have
Yeah.
been even
Yeah.
worse. Yeah.
By the way, I don't want to directly dive into questions, but I really want to ask you this. What happened in composing opera class?
Oh,
What did you
that
guys do?
yeah, you were there for like the first one, right?
First week, then I quit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, before I answer your question, let me ask you like why did you quit? Because I think I have a feeling the reason why you left is probably very valid and speaks a lot about what that class was designed to do. So what whiff did you catch that you decided not to stick around?
I think it's pretty simple and easy to understand, as you can imagine. I was expecting something like, by the way, I literally had no idea about composing an opera, and at that time, I hadn't watched a single opera from beginning to end, didn't check the scores. Like, I knew opera really barely and poorly. So, before choosing that class, I emailed David and Emma saying that I know nothing about opera. Should I still choose this? Like, I want to take it, but like, you guys tell me if I'm ready for it or not. I know nothing about it. By the way, of course, that mail wasn't something like two sentence. It was like this. Like, I wrote bunch of stuff. Their response was quite sincere, though. I liked it. Like, I liked their approach. They're like, this is exactly what we want to see in our class. We'd like to have you here. This is not a like complete opera course. You are going to be composing a really small opera work. So I think you'll be doing fine, Tarek. So I'm like, yeah, that's actually that sounds nice. So in the first week, I was expecting something like a repertoire or a literature that they prepared and like we are
Uh,
going to see scores and analyze them, like trying to understand the techniques behind it simply. And that's it. And I think this is the most basic approach to learning composition in any genre. So, and I didn't see that. And like in first week, we were talking about storytelling, books, movies, scenarios. And I'm like, I think everyone here completed and mastered all the techniques. And now we are talking about the storytelling and scenario and
yeah.
books. So I'm like, I'm definitely not enough for this.
I mean, that was pretty much the class. It was very vague. There was not any repertoire discussed. I mean, I think what that class, the people that get the most out of that class are people that are like writing an opera and want feedback on it. There was like there was very little substantive like concrete discussion about technique and scoring. It was very abstract and oftentimes class would be like a 2 hour discussion on form or like storytelling, this is what you saw. So I decided not to go back. I do think that like there are people that get a lot out of it, but they're the people that are interested in writing an opera. It's not like an intro to opera class. So yeah, it was probably a good idea. But I think they were just trying to get people in there. So that's probably oh yeah, no.
You also withdrew? You
No,
quit?
I stuck it out, but so I was considering writing an opera, and then after about a month in there,
Mhm.
I was like working on other stuff. Like I had a commission that I had to do, and I wanted to write a string quartet for the Jack reading. Realized that I just didn't really have the time to write an opera. And I think being in that class and talking about it a lot, I realized it's not really something that I'm interested in as I thought. So I think it was helpful in that sense that I'd always kind of been curious about opera
Mhm.
and then talking to people that work in that field and discussing what goes into making an opera made me realize that I'm not at a point right now in my career where that's something that I want to do. So it was helpful in that regard. And I mean, a very interesting conversation, but I prefer to have very interesting conversations with colleagues, outside of the
Hmm.
class. I definitely like the more substantive, like lesson-based approach of like we're
Yeah.
gonna look at this opera, we're gonna study the techniques, we're gonna talk about vocal scoring, we're gonna talk about form and pacing, what it means to write a modern aria, what works these days, advice on like how to get an opera staged, like what do you need to do in order to actually see a project through, which like some of that more abstract stuff we were talking about, but like in order to look at because David T. Little was the one kind of like leading that class, and he's
Hmm.
a somewhat prolific American opera composer. Like he has a number of successful operas that are doing the rounds throughout opera houses in America.
Hmm.
And we had to like ask for him to show us some scores and like talk about his own opera, which we did. And one week he brought in the score to Black Lodge, and we looked at it. It's like a monodrama. There's like one vocalist, and then I think like a rock ensemble and a string quartet. So it's a pretty pared down ensemble. We looked at the score. He talked about it. It was very interesting. But that was one class. From what I understand, this semester there's more structure. But after having been in it for one semester, I thought I can use that time more valuably just working on my own stuff. So
I remember after I quit from that class, there was a presentation, and what was the class we must attend? That
the weekly forum.
Yeah, there was a professor from Yale or somewhere else. I don't remember. And him and Juan Gro has done several opera together. I don't remember his name.
Yeah, Columbia. I forget his name actually,
Oh,
but yeah,
Colombia.
he was a librettist. Yeah,
Yeah. So I remember someone asked how long usually writing an opera takes, and he said 2 to 4 years, something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking. I mean, like that's for like a professional, like full length stage production opera. Like
Hmm.
if students, you're probably not going to do that for your first opera,
Yeah.
But yeah, for something like that, yeah, it takes a long time. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of work, and then like getting a performance of it is so hard. Like I think the only way to really be successful writing new opera nowadays, at least in America, is to write something that's very small in scale.
Lengthwise and personnel wise. Just because like an opera is a huge undertaking, it
Mm.
combines stage setup, acting, singing, stage direction, sometimes dancing, effects, and costume, makeup. Yeah, the whole 9 yards. And it just that costs so much money. And particularly in America, there's a shortage of money for the arts, especially now with the current administration slashing a lot of stuff. No matter what your political orientation is, that just means that there's less money for opera right now. But I think the only way to succeed is that if you have something that's marketable, that isn't going to be a huge undertaking, and especially if you can find your own performers. Yeah, that helps a lot.
I think when we are talking about music, getting commissions, getting your pieces to perform, I think we almost always end up talking about money somehow. So, yeah. Do you know how many people quit after I quit that
It
from
was
the class?
like a third of the class, at least. Like a decent amount of people left. I can't remember exactly who was in there, but I remember like at least three people. Three
Yeah.
people. Yeah, yeah. That's not for everyone.
Has anyone written something like opera and ha had a chance to get their pieces performed out of that class?
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember Tristan.
Yeah, I
If
noticed.
yeah, he joined that class because he was working on an opera. He
Yeah,
had
Tristan was probably one of the best out of us when
yeah,
it
yeah,
comes to opera.
that class was for him.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're writing an opera, it's like a 2 hour like studio lesson, basically, where like if you bring an opera, like you'll get really good critique from two people that have produced operas
Yeah.
and made operas happen. So that for him, it was great. That he's the type of person that class was designed for.
So Tristan was the only one who had a piece performed.
So he's working on opera, and then this semester a woman joined from China named Sinsin, and she's working on an opera as well. It might be done, and I think she's now working on rehearsals and like getting it ready to go. They're like helping her. This is her first time doing something like that. She's very entrepreneurial, oriented. It's hard to put on an opera by yourself, and she's basically doing it. So for her, she's getting a lot of good feedback. So it's basically the two of them, and then everybody else in there, is just absorbing, I guess.
How is the grading goes?
Oh, you show up, you get an A. Grading in There's programs for music, grading doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
They're usually pretty chill about it. I have some classes like analysis class, like that analysis class that we were in,
Hmm.
Schenkerian analysis.
Yeah.
That was like the most strict grading class that I was in, that I've been in my first 2 semesters there. That one, and then I have a score reading class as well, where we have to read orchestra music at the piano. We have to do like a weekly performance of like an excerpt. And now right now we're doing opera. And so we have to sing the aria while we play the orchestra part of the piano. And that's pretty hard. The professor for that class, if you're not prepared when you perform in front of everyone, she'll ding you grade wise.
I think that's how things should be, by the way.
I agree, honestly. Well, I mean, I think there's a balance. I think if every class was like that, it would have a negative effect on your output as a composer. Like, I think like what a master's program is about is writing a lot of good music, you
Mm.
know? You've kind of figured, I think the undergrad is where you develop a lot of like very base level skills, like ear training, sight reading. You know, you study counterpoint in theory, not that you're going to use them in any conventional sense, but just so that you understand like what goes into the thought behind composing. And undergrad programs tend to be more rigorous, which I think is good. Like that's at a point where like you don't have an artistic identity yet, really. Like
Mhm.
very early stages of being formed. So composing is just something where you're feeling it out and deciding if it's what you want to do while you're gaining these very base level skills that you'll build on top of for the rest of your career. Masters is different because now you know this is what you want to do, and you at least have some basic idea of an artistic direction that you want to go in. And your master's degree or your time spent studying a master's is just figuring out what that is and how to tailor it more, sculpt it, and be more specific. And I think having a really rigorous load of classes and exams and stuff is antithetical to that goal. You know, it's counter.
Mhm.
But I do think there are some where I missed more of that structure and rigor.
I was shocked when in that Schenkerian analysis class because during undergrad, I don't know how was yours, but I believe this is the case in everywhere in the world. You know about sonata form, you know about almost all the classical forms, and you study them. You have quizzes out of it. Sometimes you not sometimes but almost always you compose very small pieces in those forms. So you kind of master them, but like you are not gonna use them. When I recognize that our only strict class in grading is about sonata forms, I was not happy. Schenkerian analysis was new, but like not really new to anyone who has undergrad degree in composition, I believe.
Yeah, I would say it's not so much a sonata form class as it is. I mean, I think Schenkerian analysis is the main focus, or it was in that class. And the thing with a master's program or like a graduate level analysis class is you don't necessarily know the background of everybody coming into it. And so for that, I think it was helpful. Like I knew about sonata form. I knew about,
Mhm.
exposition, development, recap, that's the type 3, dual thematic exposition, development, and recap. That's like the most common, the type 3. But I didn't know so much about the other types, like the type 1, where you just have development with, it could be a continuous exposition,
Mhm.
and then a recap that's basically the same thing. It's basically just a large binary, sorry, an exposition and a recap, no development. I didn't know so much about those other
Mm.
sonata form. I had studied sonata form, and I could probably point out like the EEC and like the crux, the return, these sort of things. But I don't know, it was helpful for me to go back over sonata form. Also, being in academia is kind of like a constant study of sonata form. I don't think you ever really get done studying sonata form. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm probably going to do a doctorate program, and I'm probably going to continue to study sonata form in the doctorate.
Aren't you bothered
By sonata form or by studying?
by studying sonata form over and over again?
No, I'm not. I think when it comes to like practices that have aged out, or techniques that have aged out, like tonal counterpoint, like species counterpoint, first, second, third, fourth species counterpoint, tonal harmony, Schenkerian analysis of tonal harmony, voice leading, 4-part chorale, this sort of thing. When you study it, I don't think it's so much about learning how to do it as it's about learning about the inner workings of what it means to make a piece of music. Because I think the style has obviously changed significantly,
Mhm.
but I think a lot of the mechanisms that go into making a piece of music are still very much the same. So if you understand how somebody else has constructed a form, a guideline for how to make something, on multi different levels, on the surface level, measure to measure, phrase structure, and that sort of thing, to large macro structures like sonata form, whatever, the form of, different movements or an entire work. To me, understanding how that works informs you in breaking it and making your own. I think the more that you understand about the rules that were in place for hundreds of years, you can decide what you want to take and what you want to leave in constructing your own music. So I don't think it's so much about you don't study sonata form so that you can write a sonata. You study sonata form to learn about form in general, which I think is one of the most important aspects of composing, form. So I'm not particularly bothered by it. I also I just enjoy analysis. So maybe I'm the wrong person to ask. I'm kind of an analysis nerd. And then another part of it is if you're a composer, how are you going to make money? You're probably going to teach at some point. You're probably going to be, if you're an instrumentalist, you're going to teach, private lessons or maybe do master classes, whatever. But if you're a composer and you want to get a tenured position, you're going to teach at a university, probably private lessons in composition, but also you're going to be teaching sonata form. You're going to be teaching speech counterpoint. You might not want to do that. And there's other avenues to making money, but for most composers that go through the process of getting a doctorate or going through academia, that's the end goal for them, So it asks a question about what is it all for? If we're studying music so that we can teach music, and it's just kind of this constant cycle of people studying and teaching and studying.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it brings people a meaning, and it's preserving an art form. And I think there's still new discoveries to be made, honestly. I don't think the book is closed on, 18th century music.
Wow, that's interesting actually. That I don't hear ideas and thoughts of music. I mean, studying music composition like you. People are usually depressed about it. At the end, they all end like you said, we are studying, we are teaching, we are studying, we are teaching, we are not contributing to anything. And at the end, it's a desperate realization. I mean, most of the music students I know of that they end up depressed, thinking that the thing they've been studying for years doesn't mean a lot, and it's not special sometimes. Of course, there are people like me, you, and some students. I believe that we are minority studying and at the end becoming happy about this stuff. So it's nice. It's nice knowing that you are happy about it. But I'm also happy about not as much as you probably. There are so many stuff that bothering me in music composition and how people try to fit that in academia.
Yeah, I mean, there's areas for improvement, certainly, in the way that we teach certain things. I mean, when it comes to classical music, a big area of neglect, I think, is rhythm. I think particularly with performers, but also composers, I think so many classical performers are taught to just kind of fake it when it comes to rhythm in contemporary music. Because, you'll see a lot of crazy stuff nested tuplets that are taught, syncopated offbeat, I mean, you look at Fernie-Ho or whatever, and you're obviously not going to be playing that precisely, but there's an in-between between Mozart and Fernie-Ho where there's a lot of music that is somewhat complex rhythmically that a lot of younger conservatory performers just can't play. And I have become aware of this, unfortunately, through, putting stuff out for readings and whatnot and trying to get people to play my music. And I'm writing quarter note triplets and people are struggling with it. It's tough. And I think that classical music in general struggles with rhythm a little bit because there's no association with groove, and because it's so loose, you can fake it a lot and kind of get away with, or if you listen to something and then you play it at the piano or whatever, you can kind of just copy what you heard instead of understanding how to play rhythms. So I think that's an area where there's improvement to be made, but that's mostly for performers.
Yeah.
But going back to what you were saying about the philosophy of the whole thing, that's why there's such a high burnout rate for what we do. I mean, most of the people that go to university to study computer science or biology or whatever, they're going to go all the way through and then they're going to get a job usually. But I think when it comes to music, somewhere around 80 to 90% of the people that get a degree in music aren't going to be aren't going to find success at the professional level, particularly because, like we were talking about earlier, there's not a lot of money, there's not a lot of funding. So there aren't the orchestras of the world, the symphony halls are not sending out letters to composers saying, we run out of music. We need new music for you guys to write. So please, everyone, we want to commission all the that's not happening. The opportunities are scarce. And usually if you do get commissioned by a major orchestra, it's like a 10-minute piece that's a concert opener. But I just think like if you can't be optimistic about it, then you're probably in the wrong field because it doesn't get any better. So
Yeah.
either you come to terms with it and you just work really hard and you don't let it bother you, that it's kind of an uphill battle. I mean, you have to take the good with the bad. I also think that like music is one of the most rewarding things that you can do in your life. If you can find meaning in music, that's something that like that'll be with you your entire life. Like athletes, they burn out in their 30s and 40s if they're lucky. The rest of their life they're just kind of hanging out. But scholars, musicians, this is something that can bring you fulfillment until you die, basically. And to me, that's something that's very, very special and profound. And that's why I do it. I do it because I couldn't really imagine myself doing something else. And I just like going through the toil brings me meaning in life. Going to the class and doing Shakespearean analysis and then tutoring somebody on, sonata form or whatever. It just makes me happy. I just like it.
So you are going to be a professor at the end?
Probably. Yeah. I mean, unless something crazy happens, that I see that as being the natural trajectory for me. That as like a source of income and also as being like an academic space where I'm talking to other composers. There's like some sort of artistic community, being a professor at a college, being a music professor at a college in a city like New York or Chicago or something like that. You kind of probably know all the other professors in your city, and there's a community there. There's opportunities to get music played. Might not bring you a lot of money, but there's areas for career growth outside of teaching through a teaching job. And of course, like I said, the economic stability to be tenured, to have a salary, and then to have like the summer off to write music is like a pretty sweet deal. So that's probably what I'm going to do. The only thing is there's a lot of teachers, there's a lot of professors, there's a lot of professors that are going to be coming into the field soon. So the job situation is not so incredible for incoming professors. But I mean, also there's like an aging curve in America in particular. I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but there's a lot of people right now that are in their, 50s, 60s. Baby boomer generation is, massive, and they're going to be aging out of those positions somewhat soon. So sometime in the next 10 to 20 years, they're going to be almost completely gone, and there'll be more jobs open then. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to.
Are you comfortable talking about stuff like trying to find internships as a white male?
I know what you're talking about. It's something that it's something like in music, it's very present because you have a lot of scholarships, competitions, these sort of things where they tend to favor marginalized groups. Female composers, female performers, gay composers, gay performers. And my take on it is when you think about the history of classical music, European classical music, it's an art form that has been dominated
by men,
white guys, basically, from Europe. That's what, and the level of elitism has always been so high. I think it like peaked in like the 50s and 60s with like just like people like Boulez, I think he represents a lot of what's completely wrong with how the club is set up, where it's like once you get in, you close the door and then you laugh at the people that are outside. That's kind of, for a long time, that's how it's worked. If you're a gay composer, you don't talk about it. Oftentimes, like in the case of somebody like Tchaikovsky, you can't because you live in Russia, during a time when you'd be killed for that probably, or like Britain or Poland, like these people, like you just don't talk about it. And that to me is very sad. And I think that has probably contributed to the downfall in popularity. The fact that classical music has been so closed off and so elitist and so so carefully gatekept from the common people, from Black people, from people of other races or whatever. You just like you write old white guy music for old white guys, for like centuries. And then you're like, why don't young people like this? Like, well, why don't other people, why don't these other communities enjoy this? Well, why are we shrinking? You shot yourself in the foot, close the door. And so to me, what we need in order to keep this thing going, which I'm very concerned with continuing this legacy and preserving, classical music for as long as, we can, because I think it's a beautiful gift for humanity. As elitist and gatekept as it is, those guys wrote some fantastic music, and I want to preserve it, and I want to bring new people in, and I want more new people to be as in love with it as I am. And that unfortunately might mean giving more, not unfortunately, realistically, that might mean elevating these people, opening the door for people that historically have not really had an avenue in. And so I don't mind it that much, to be honest with you. When there's a call for scores that's for gay composers, I'm like, yeah, let's get more gay composers in, honestly. If there's a call for scores for women composers, I mean, talk about the history of marginalized female composers. I mean, Clara Schumann's a great example. Incredibly talented composer, not taken seriously because she's a woman.
Yeah.
Seriously, very rightly so. I mean, Ruth Crawford Seeger, another example, American composer. Just incredible music. Her string quartet, 1933, just a fantastic piece. It's incredible. I mean, a lot of her orchestral stuff is just so fresh, but she fought really hard. And I think that nowadays, if we can just open the door for those people and say, that, listen, the white guys have kind of been in the seat of power for like a really long time, and we've just enjoyed that and passed it on to more white guys, to come in. Now let's open the door, and it might mean that like some white guys don't get as many opportunities. Historically, we've been doing just fine. I don't think that we're going to be, there's no great replacement theory in classical music. So
I agree with everything you said, but I think you also think that there are some downsides of it. Like people take advantage of the situation. I know a bunch of people who are not eligible to get to places because like they are just not enough in the field they are in. But like they are getting commissions, scholarships. It's at the end, it's almost all about like they being non-American, gay, non-binary or whatever. And I think those are the people that are really bad representation of their community, I believe. I think like they are hurting themselves because of people like them.
I think I get what you're saying. I think you're saying that
just imagine someone getting a full scholarship, but like that person doesn't deserve it. But like the school gave it to that person because like he is, I don't know, he's non-American or something.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's like the question of like reparations for people in America. I don't know that there's like a perfect way to solve the problem. You kind of have to choose between the lesser of two evils. And I guess I'm more okay with sacrificing some opportunities in order to like get more of these other people interested and involved. But I do hear what you're saying. This is like, it's funny. There's this big movement. I mean, not to bring it back to politics in America, but there's this big like DEI movement.
Yeah, I know. I'm aware.
Anti-DEI movement and I think that, I mean, this argument goes in two different directions, and that is on one very far end of the direction where we're going to get rid of all of this. Like this is just, this is putting people that don't deserve to be in these positions, damaging our society because we're elevating these people that don't deserve it, and it's damaging them because they're now put in a place, that's one side. And then the other side is more like what I was talking about earlier, where like historically we've enjoyed some very privileged positions. So I think like somewhere in the middle there's the right answer. I don't know exactly where it is, to be honest with you. I just know that I think getting these marginalized people more involved is a priority, and you have to do it somehow. I mean, in a perfect world, there's just more funding and more people can get in general, and it's not just like minority groups. But I do think that they should be a priority, to be completely honest. That's just where I sit.
I see. I also agree on that. There's a gray area in between those end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
There's a gray area that is more, I think that's the most healthy approach possible. Like seeing the downsides and upsides of stuff, but like also you kind of get lost sometimes. Like you don't know which side to choose. So just stick in between. And
yeah, I mean, listen, life is about it's not so black and white at the end of the day. There's a lot of gray area. I mean, that's where we live, in the gray area. Not to get super philosophical, but I mean, what does the word objective truth really mean? At the end of the day, it means different things to different people, and I think that just kind of points out the irony of objective truth. If it means different things to different people, then how objective is it really? It pertains to stuff like this. There's no like one right answer because everybody has different opinions, and the truth is finding, the Venn diagram where most of those opinions intersect and then trying to work something out there. But luckily, I'm not in a position where I have to do this. Like, I'm not in like an administrative position where I have to be calling these shots. I don't envy those people because, I mean, no matter what you decide, you have people on both sides telling you you're a villain.
Yeah.
Some of the things that they say are going to be right too, unfortunately. So yeah, I don't envy those positions. And I think if I was in a position like that, I would probably put more thought into it and have more of a concrete, definitive position. But yeah, I have the luxury of not needing to be so
Don't you think that not caring about anyone's race, gender, sexual orientation, and not caring if they're being minority or not is the most woke thing someone can do?
As a gold standard, as like a place to get, I think, yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah,
what
right?
I'm striving for. But in reality, like that's just not how it works right now. Like
Yes.
you still like you're unfortunately your race still matters. Like today, because in our not so recent history, I mean, some people of certain races, were enslaved. I mean, it's a lot of people want to just like put that behind us, like, oh, we're just gonna move on now. But the effect of that is still very felt in almost every field of our lives. So I think eventually, like, we should try to work towards what you're talking about, but we're not there yet. And so if we just like cut everything off and say, okay, from now on, we're just nobody's going to talk about race, and it's just not realistic.
It's not fair sometimes. So yeah.
Sure. Understatement of the century. It's not fair in both directions. I mean, in some cases, you are the color of your skin can be a benefit when you're applying for certain things, and in other cases, it depending on who's receiving the application or whatever, it can absolutely go the other way. So
Yeah, for sure.
just have to like try to do our best to like steer towards that ideal that we both talked about earlier, and I don't think we're doing that bad of a job right now. We certainly could be doing better. And I think that we have to keep that in the back of our minds. We can't get complacent with things how they are right now. Always be looking at ways to improve the system, even if we disagree on how that is. The discussion is ongoing. But yeah, I don't think we should get rid of, completely preferential treatment towards minority groups because I think it's very beneficial in a lot of ways.
I agree.
But yeah, suffice it to say, there's improvement to be made in the future.
Yeah, yeah. And you guys need a lot of time because like Trump is still there.
Yeah, so we're going in the wrong direction in a lot of them. So yeah, it's unfortunate. It just seems like that's what happens. America is a very complicated place, and I don't know. The majority of the country decided that that's what they wanted. So it's the reality of the situation.
I don't remember the percentage.
People will have you believe it was a landslide. I think it was pretty close. In the popular vote, it was pretty close. But we have this, electoral college here where the popular vote doesn't decide the election. It's based on states, and this population of those states determines how many votes each state has. And then you don't win part of a state, you win the entire state, or you don't. So on paper, if you look at a map, like it looks like the entire country is red. A lot of those states are, rural, and there's not a lot of people living there. And then, the West Coast and East Coast states are, tiny slivers of blue, but there's like millions and millions of people living there that have a lot of voting power. So yeah, I don't know exactly how close it was, but I mean, he won. So
Yeah. So coming back to studying composition in academia, you mentioned that in undergrad you complete the basics, like you go through all the forms, counterpoint, and at masters you kind of start to find yourself as a human being and as a composer too. What do you think about people who has no undergrad degree and doing masters in music composition?
yeah, there's a guy that I'm friends with at Manus right now who has a undergrad in biochem and did, I think, cancer research
Shout out to Clayson.
at the place. And he's a very, very talented composer. I don't have a sense of what his like foundational understanding of music is. Like I think he knows the basics of theory. I think he probably has a pretty good ear. I imagine he studied some of this on his own time, and he probably took some classes. This is a conversation that I'd love to have with him. Unfortunately, he's a successful composer, so he's a very busy guy right now. I mean, he writes music for like Netflix and Amazon originals. So I think it depends on the individual. Like some people don't need it. some people are just really talented composers. I mean, they are their intuition makes up for the fact that they don't have some of that basic, baseline understanding of music. But I think for the vast majority of composers, it's very helpful. It's very helpful not only because, of what we were talking about earlier with, understanding the mechanisms of music. You also, when you're studying music, you're just introduced to a lot of repertoire. And that knowledge of repertoire is very, very, very helpful. But it's not the only way to have an understanding of repertoire. Like Kalayson knows a lot of music. Like he's very he has his ear to the ground on, a lot of contemporary music, and he's at least somewhat familiar with, older standard repertoire. But yeah, it just getting people with, a questionable musical background up to date with everything is what undergrad programs are great for. But yeah, I think you can be perfectly successful probably without ever going into academia. And I think there's examples of that you can point to. Off the top of my head, I'm struggling, but yeah, it's just the different avenues. But like, if you're not in academia and not getting that baseline understanding, yeah, there has to be something else that makes up for it.
If someone without undergrad degree wants to be a professor, can they be in US?
No, I don't think so. Very hard. I think you could be a professor if you are. There's two avenues, I think, to being a professor of music in the United States. For what we do for composition. One is you go through academia, you get at least a master's, preferably a PhD. And in a doctorate, a lot of the times why a doctorate is so helpful is, by the time you get to a doctorate, usually they're free for composition, and a lot of them come with teaching opportunities, like your work study, where you're teaching undergraduate theory and composition and counterpoint, whatever, while you're getting your doctorate, getting your degree. So then by the time you graduate, you have experience teaching at the undergraduate level, at the university level already, and you have a piece of paper that says that you know a lot about music, and that usually can get you a job. I mean, like, I know a guy who, this guy's name is Ryan Solomon. He got a degree at UC Davis, composer, not like a super well-known guy, like not getting commissions from like the LA Phil or anything like that, but he got a full-time composition professor job at Berklee, where I did my undergrad, straight out of college, straight out of getting his doctorate, because he had the degree and he had experience teaching. So that's one avenue, and it's very helpful. That's what I'd say, like probably 80 to 90% of composers, maybe more, do. But then the other avenue is just you're a successful composer. You have pieces you're commissioned by orchestras. So clearly, like, it doesn't really matter what you through your success, it's clear that you know enough to be successful, and the hope is that you can pass that on. And but yeah, most people, that's not the avenue that they take. And a lot of the people that get professor positions because of their success, like, I mean, at the new school, Timo, Andres,
Lowell.
Well, yeah, these guys are successful, and like they're pretty well-known American composers. Like, Timo had a piano concerto premiered with the LA Phil last year, and last year. So, he's a pretty major composer in America, but he also has a doctorate. So no, Timo actually doesn't have a doctorate. He has an undergrad, or he has a master's, but he doesn't have a doctorate. Saran, I believe, has a doctorate.
So Timo is a professor without PhD?
Yeah. So I mean, that's an example of a guy that doesn't have a PhD.
So there is not a certain procedure to be a professor?
And what I'm saying is it's different for everyone. Like, there's not like one path.
In Turkey, there's only one path.
What's the path in Turkey?
You do undergrad, master's, and PhD.
And then you become a professor?
Not immediately, but I think you have to. So you become something like doctor. Like in Turkey, we say docent, and you, after your PhD, you teach for 6 years or 5 years or something. Then you get the degree of professor. So the only difference between a PhD graduate teacher and a professor is the work experience. That's it.
Yeah, it's very different in America. You can come at different directions. But yeah. So for me, like, I mean, international success and acclaim is not guaranteed. So I'm probably going to get a doctorate just because it's the most sure, steady path. But you can get, I mean, it's like I mentioned, you get some teaching experience while you're doing your doctorate. Depending on how long your doctorate is, you could get like 4 years of experience teaching while you're getting your degree, that's paid for. And by the end of it, you have a pretty solid resume of like, now you have a doctorate, you're clearly very knowledgeable, and you have this experience. So like, you can gain that experience while you're getting the doctorate. which from what I hear about Turkey is what I would guess is probably the main difference.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, like, depending on who you are, like, it helps to be successful too. Like, it helps to have that star power, not necessarily star power, but just to have done a lot of stuff and gotten stuff recorded and be a member of the community. Because like when you apply to a position, you know, the first thing people are going to do is like ask around, like, does anybody know this guy? You know, or is this just like some random person that, you know, got a doctorate and stayed in a room with the door shut for 5 years and now they're ready, coming out and want to teach. So if you don't have a lot of success, like if you're just very academic and you always got good grades and you thrive in academia and you want to be a professor, probably you do have to get a job at some like random college somewhere, like a community college, or like you have to move to like a rural state like Montana or you know, something like that and teach at some, you know, random university for a few years, and then you can have jobs for you when you apply to live in like a big city or something. But yeah, so there's a couple of different ways from what I understand in America.
Are you making any money right now?
Right now, no. I have to get a job this summer, but I'm not really making any money right now. I mean, I have like a few very small commissions, but it's not enough to like pay rent or anything. Mostly working off savings, getting some financial help from my family, and I have the scholarships, and then I have federal student aid and federal loans. So that's what's covering everything right now. I have to get a job this summer, and the decision that I'm strapped with right now is, do I want to do a music job where I'm like teaching piano, or doing some administrative like librarian job or something like that somewhere, or am I just going to get like a regular day job that like allows me to have time to do music stuff on the side? I don't know. I have to figure that out sometime in the next month.
I think that's the case in all around the world. Like if you're studying music, you make money out of teaching piano, like almost all the time.
You can make a lot of money doing it. I mean, especially if you're self-employed, like working for, because I before I came to my undergrad or my master's degree, I lived in Los Angeles for 2 years and I just taught. That was how and I was able to afford living in LA with a car and, you know, basic expenses and like save up money just through two different teaching jobs. And one of them I taught in a studio, and the students came to me and they assigned me students and I had like a regular schedule. And then the other one, I would just drive freelance to people's houses and they paid me directly. And when I was working in the studio, I made $35 an hour, which is pretty good. But I couldn't, they were very careful about giving me just enough hours to where I was considered part-time, and that like nobody there was a full-time employee. So they were just kind of getting the system. So everyone there was like had that as like one of their jobs and then did something else. So I didn't get any benefits from them. I didn't get any like healthcare or dental or anything like that. So, but I made $35 an hour doing that. And then when I was a freelance teacher, I made $60 an hour because I named my price basically. And it was in LA in a pretty rich area. So, I mean, there was no shortage of people that were willing to pay that. And like as somebody that had a degree in music and then, you know, had being a principal, you know, jazz pianist in my undergrad, I had the clout to be able to demand that money. But also living in LA, I would have to drive around to these
Yeah.
people's because I didn't have a studio. I lived in an apartment. I had like a keyboard, so I couldn't really have students come to me. So I had to drive to them, and that took a lot of time. Sometimes I would have like an hour, 2 hour commute at the beginning and end of my day, and that was just so I really made less than $60 an hour, and then also being self-employed, taxes took a decent amount of that money as well, state taxes. It's expensive to live in California.
Yeah.
Pretty big California tax slapped on everything.
Now you're living in Manhattan, right?
Yeah, now I live in Manhattan, so it's going to be same thing. But there's ways to avoid taxes, shall we say, with cash considerations.
You didn't study composition in your undergrad? It was just piano?
No, I did. I was at Berklee for 4 years. I did a dual master or a dual degree in composition and jazz composition. And when you go to Berklee, you for your undergrad, you declare your principal instrument, and then you have to pass proficiency and do a studio and take lessons in your principal for at least 2 years. So I had jazz piano and classical piano lessons that I would take with this guy. And then at the end of each semester, I had a jury where I had to play exercises, you know, scales, arpeggios, and then like standard jazz chord progressions with, I had to come up with voicings. And then I had to sight read a jazz chart. I had to sight read some notated classical music. And then I had a jazz piece I had to play, and I had a classical piece I had to play. And the jazz piece, I had to do my own arrangement. I had to take a solo. And then the classical piece, I just had to, So, like, for example, my third semester, I think we were doing, by that time, the scales were like all the modes. So I had to do like Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, that sort of thing, in all keys. And then I had to do some more extended jazz progressions with altered tensions, like a 2 chord with a 9 going to like a 5 chord, like a flat 13 or whatever. And then I had the piece that I played was, I think I played Misty, which is like, it's like a jazz ballad that I arranged for piano, took a solo. And then I did the Pathétique piano, first Beethoven first movement. And that was like, so I mean, I didn't have a degree in performance, which had obviously a lot more requirements, along with like a senior recital, which I didn't have to do a senior. I did do a senior recital, but it was for composition and jazz composition, where I had a collection of my music. But you just have to take, lessons with your principal for the first 2 years. That's what I did.
Double major, you said?
Yeah, composition and jazz composition at Berklee. The jazz composition program is really good. Really, I mean, the reason people go to Berklee, I think, is because of the personnel, like the faculty. They're a jazz school, or at least they originated as a jazz school. They're less of a jazz school now, I think, because a lot of those people that were there, in like the 60s, 70s, 80s, that were like the jazz people, they're starting to get old, and they're retiring. And in the next generation, Berklee's growing a lot, and it's becoming more of a pop school. Like, I think now the biggest majors at Berklee, probably still performance, but songwriting,
Yeah.
and film scoring are very big at Berklee. And I initially went there. I didn't know that I wanted to do composition. I went to Berklee because I was a jazz piano player who was interested in doing more jazz piano and maybe doing film scoring. That's why I chose Berklee, because it was pretty good in both of those regards. The composition program, not as solid. When it comes to personnel, they have Marty Epstein. She's really good. I mean, she's a Guggenheim Fellowship composer. People go there to study with her in a similar way that they go to Manus to study with like Cerrone or whoever. When I was there, Richard Carrick, who's a French-American composer, was he was the chair of the department. So he was a pretty influential guy. But that's kind of it. I mean, the list drops off pretty quick. I mean, there's probably more people there now that I don't know, but I can only really compare that composition program to composition programs that my friends are in, or the one at Manus that I'm in right now. And when it comes to things like readings, residencies, and that sort of thing, Berklee, the composition program's kind of lacking. Like, when I was there, you were lucky to get a reading, arranged for you per semester. Like, it was not guaranteed that there was going to be a reading. It was on you to find the performers. The good thing about Berklee is there's a lot of really talented performers there. It's not so much a classical school, so it's harder to find classical performers than it is to find like pop and jazz performers, but they're there and they're usually willing to play. Berklee has an orchestra, but the orchestra at Berklee, it's really hard to get a reading session there. I don't think it's impossible. I think that there's like every now and then they'll do like a call for scores, like you can submit a piece, but it's not like Manus, where it's like Manus, every semester there's an orchestra reading, and it's basically like whoever wants to get in there gets in there. You get 30 minutes and it's recorded. Like that just doesn't exist at Berklee.
I think that's the best thing about Manus, like Jack Quartet and orchestra reading. It's perfect.
You're talking about like probably the leading contemporary music string quartet in
Yeah.
America, maybe the world, is just in residency. Like, not only do they read student pieces every semester, you could have a reading with Jack, a 30-minute session with Jack 4 times as a master, 8 times as an undergrad. You could get 8 different readings with Jack in Manus. That's crazy. That's really there's not a lot of schools that offer that.
If I had a chance to stay and like complete my master's at Manus, I would probably milk Jack Quartet. Probably like I would,
Like
I would compose bunch of string quartet.
Yeah. I had a piece read by them. I'm going to do another piece over the summer. I'm having a piece read by the orchestra next week on Friday. Just finished it. I'm probably going to write another one over the summer and have them do. I'm going to have at least one more orchestra reading. I mean, and then the other thing here that's so great is if you submit a piece for the reading, you get a recording. Then you can submit it to try to win the Martineau Prize, which is every year they select two winners of orchestral composition that get a few $1,000s and a concert with a premiere in front of a full audience, and you get rehearsals. The thing about the reading sessions is it's a 30-minute reading session, so there's no rehearsal. They don't see the music ahead of time. They just sit down, you rehearse for maybe 10-15 minutes, and then you spend the rest of the time recording stuff. But yeah, there's also the opportunity to win a prize. And I mean, the fact that it has a name and it comes with money and you get a professional video of a concert, it's huge. I know, like, my friend's Arjun, he graduated before I got there, the semester before I got there. He won that prize, and then it propelled him into success with other groups. I think he had like a piece commissioned by Sandbox, some other groups that like reached out to him just because of this this piece that he wrote.
Also, there is Alex Glass.
Yeah, he won. He won last year. His piece was performed, I think, last month. It's a really cool piece. He's gonna get stuff now because he won that prize. So the fact that, I mean, like, the school, Manus, has a lot of opportunities built into the program for you to find success, and at the very least get good recording. I mean, like, if you're applying for a doctorate program, a good orchestra recording is like worth its weight in gold. I mean, it doesn't weigh anything, but it's like very, very important for getting into a doctorate program. You kind of have to show that you can write for all ensembles, all practices, and orchestra is the hardest one. So if you have a good orchestra piece, if you have a good recording, it just is so helpful. And Manus, that's a very real possibility. Berklee, not so much.
That's crazy though. I thought like Berklee would be something like Manus, even better at opportunities to.
It's just not a classical composition school. That's not where their priorities are. The thing that Berklee is really, really good at, and where Berklee thrives, is their production program is really good. Their production program is like the production equivalent of what the Manus program is in terms of opportunities. Like, they have state-of-the-art studios where you can basically, if you're a production student there, or if you're like a songwriter, you can produce a full-length album with professional quality free while you're there, if you find the right people and if you know who to talk to. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's such an incredible resource. They just don't really have that. I mean, like I said, I don't know if it's changed, but when I was there, it was not so easy to get orchestra readings, and they don't have like an ensemble in residency. Like, they equivalent of a jack quartet. They might bring in a group for a reading of, like, when I was there, one of the years in Boston, they have the Boston Modern Orchestra Project, which is a group mostly made up of Boston Philharmonic players, where the priority is contemporary music. Like, they'll play, I think, stuff from like Messiaen and later. And one of the years, some of the principals, like the first violin, the principal violin, the principal second violin, and then a violist and a cellist from the BMOP, as they call themselves, they came and they did a reading session for string quartets. They're very good players. They're not jack, but they're very good players. I got a good recording from them, but that was like the next semester, there was nothing. I also went there during the pandemic, which I'm sure affected. But like, even before the pandemic, like, it was still hard to get an orchestra reading there. The problem with Berklee is there's a lot of people, and it's growing too. It's a very big school. Like, I'll just look it up right now. It's a huge school. Yeah, they have 8,500 students.
Undergrad or complete?
Most of those are undergrad. Yeah. About 7,500 are undergrads and around 800 are grad students.
What is the acceptance rate?
It's going up. When I applied, it was somewhere in the 20s, I think. And now I want to say look that up too. It's 54. So it's gone up considerably since I went there. And the effect of that is, like, a lot of the students, like, in my last year there, I was a tutor. My last 2 years there, I was a music tutor. So I taught ear training, or I tutored ear training. I tutored theory and counterpoint and that sort of thing. Arranging too. I was a jazz arranging tutor. And I started to notice that, like, towards the end, some of these, we talk about this base level of skills. I mean, there's a base level of skills that undergrad gets you, where you just, like, you have this foundation, but it requires a bit of a foundation too. Like, a lot of people that are classical musicians will study some sort of theory before going into an undergrad. You'll understand, like, basic Roman numeral analysis, intervallic analysis, like, minor third versus major, these are things that a lot of these students, when I was, getting towards the end of my time there, they just didn't have that. Like, I would ask them, what's the four chord in C? They didn't know. They just straight up didn't know. And that, like, it's kind of like, It's like math in the sense that like if you don't pay attention in algebra, by the time you get to calculus, well, you're screwed, because basically it builds off of off of each
Yeah.
other. And there were so many students coming in. Like I was explaining to this one student what a 12 bar blues was, and like they were just not, they couldn't understand. It's like such a simple form. They just couldn't figure it out. And like I don't know exactly how to teach that at a college level. I mean, like I could probably teach somebody at high school how to do that. Like by the time you're getting to the point where like you need to know what this is because you need to write it or you need to be able to analyze it, it becomes so much harder. And so that I think with the skyrocketing acceptance rate, with all these people come in, the bar has been lowered significantly, and the
Yeah.
resources are there have not proportionally increased. Like there's not like a double, a second orchestra reading now. They've stayed the same.
I think Berklee in the charts, Berklee is still so high. Am I right? As a
Or what?
music, yeah, as a good music school, like it's probably top 10 in
I mean,
US, right?
like, it depends. I mean, like I said, if you're a producer or you want to be a producer, you want to do production, it's still like one of the best, maybe the best school you can go to for music production. Like I know people that went there, got production degrees, and they were hired immediately out of college, and they make, pretty good money now. They have consistent work because they went to Berklee. Like there's a big Berklee to Los Angeles pipeline. Like a lot of people, like I moved there. I mean, I didn't do production, but a lot of people moved there and then they just found they got jobs because, the studios in LA like Berklee producers because they know their stuff. It's a really good program. They have good songwriting. I mean, I don't know exactly how I feel about getting a degree in songwriting, but like if you wanted to do that, Berklee has all the resources. And like I said, like it's not so much that like you're getting a piece of paper that says I'm really good at writing songs. You have the resources to make a full length album with studio, quality, professional mixing and mastering with really talented players. That's kind of incredible. I don't know a lot of other schools that have that, like conservatories don't. And Berkeley is not a conservative, but
Well, I'm talking about charts that list schools overall. In charts, I believe overall Berkeley is still so high, as far as I remember.
yeah, and I think it belongs up there because, like I said, I mean, there's a lot of programs. I mean, the film scoring program. It's not necessarily that like it's up there because of one program specifically, but they have a lot of programs that are just like they have state of the art. So like no matter what your program is, if you have like, I mean, they have this massive underground studio space with like they have like three giant recording studios, full mixing board, all the setup, and then they have smaller recording studios. Like, it doesn't really matter what your degree is. If you ever have to mix or master any music, like that's just there for you. So like all of the degrees benefit from that. Now, like I said, there's a lot of people there now. Those resources are becoming strained. They didn't add extra studio space. They added a lot of new students. They build new dorms, but they don't build new, studio spaces. They don't get a second orchestra going to record new pieces. But yeah, I mean, still as like general all around, it's still a very, very good school. But I mean, if I knew that I wanted to do composition, I probably wouldn't have gone there. I probably would have still gone to Boston. I think I would have gone to either the New England Conservatory or I would have gone to Boston Conservatory. Like Boston Conservatory, I don't know what their residency situation is, but they get like groups to come and do readings. Like I think like TAC has done stuff with them, like groups of that level where like they have some sort of national acclaim in the US. And then like they also have, pretty solid faculty. They're cheaper than Berklee and they are a conservatory. So there's a lot of classical musicians there. But then they also get to use the benefits of Berklee. Like they get to use those Berklee studio
Oh,
areas.
that's nice. That's a
Yeah, Boston Conservatory, I think, is a very good. I know somebody that's graduating from there right now, and they are very, very happy studying with Marty Epstein. So, that's probably where I would have gone. But also, I think like I needed to go to Berkeley to realize that that's what I wanted to do. And when I went to Berkeley, I was still very interested in jazz, and I think I needed to get that. I needed to go through the jazz composition program to realize that that's not really where my heart was. Like I really needed to exhaust it and see it all the way through to understand that that wasn't really my thing.
To sum up, you already mentioned you actually already answered this question, but I'm still going to ask you this just to clarify. And so Berkeley is also really popular in Turkey. Like there are a lot of students who want to do masters there or like do second undergrad there after they complete their undergrad in Turkey. So what kind of people would you suggest to go and study there?
Oh, I think you just have to look at like what Berkeley is good at, or like what the people that go to Berkeley and then find success after. Berkeley is, I mean, one of the main things that has going for us, aside from what I've mentioned, like the recording spaces, the resources there, some of the personnel. Aside from that, it has the name power, right? I mean, like people in Turkey want to go there, people in China want to go there, people in Japan. I mean, people from all over the world know about it. And so really, really good musicians from all over the world go there. And if you're somebody that wants to put a band together and tour, it's the place to go. If you're somebody that wants to record an album and wants to get really solid studio musicians on it, you know, it's a really good place to be. I think like a lot of the people that are successful performers went there for performance, or there's like some combination majors you can do. Like I can't remember the name of one where like you do a little bit of arranging, you do a little bit of mixing, and then it's performance and stuff. You can kind of like mix and match the stuff that you're interested in. People will do these majors and then a lot of them won't graduate because like a degree from Berklee doesn't really mean anything unless you want to do what I want to do and like you're applying for another program somewhere. Like people that found success, performers, they go there to meet people. They go there to study with a particular person. Like if you're a bassist, you can go there and play with Victor Wooten. Like that's pretty crazy. Like he's a pretty well-known, you know, he's a major bassist. Stuff like that. Like they have really, really good performers there that you can learn from. And then you just meet people. There's opportunities to perform in Boston and abroad. That's one avenue for success. And then, like I said, a lot of them don't graduate because they didn't go there to get a degree. And Berklee is very expensive. It's a very expensive school. When I went there, it was about $45,000 after the scholarships for me a year, which I did not get a lot of scholarships going to Berklee.
Do they provide full scholarships?
Very rarely, very rarely. Like it's almost impossible to get a full ride to Berklee.
I know a bunch of people, you know. I know a bunch of people who got full scholarships, and it's all they do is it's crazy though, Tyler. I don't know you are aware of this, but there are so many people outside of US know the tricks, literally like know little tricks to get full scholarships from some music schools, and Berklee is one of them, and it's crazy. And the biggest thing they do is to compose or perform a really ethnic music from.
Yeah, Berklee does love that. Yeah. I mean, if you know how to game the system, you know, more power to you. But like for me and my friends, like the scholarship money was very, very rare. And like I won some awards. Like I won an award for jazz composition while I was there. That came with some money, came with some grant money and stuff. So like there's opportunities to like win money while you're there, but like getting in the door with most of the people are, unless you know, like you write ethnic music or you lean into the ethnic identity, there's just not as much money. There's just so many people at Berklee, and like the funding, I mean, they are a financial institution basically. Really, at the end of the day, serves to make a lot of money for the shareholders. You know, most colleges do, you know, but Berklee in particular, like they're getting very good at it. Like when I went there during the pandemic. Going to a music school during the pandemic, you know, like all the opportunities to have your music played and recorded and stuff, they all go away. You know, singing in class and playing music in class and like having, you know, playing exams and stuff, it all goes away when you're on Zoom. Like this is what Zoom is for, you know, conversations like this, but music is not for music at all. Playing with each other, forget about it. I mean, people have become very creative, but I mean, it's hard to be that, you know, to react to that quickly. So when I went there during the pandemic, the quality of education declined significantly. Tuition stayed exactly where it was. It was not limited at all. Yeah, they did. People got really upset about it. And so one summer they offered like a couple of free summer classes. Like you could take, but it was like a very limited number of electives that you could take. And I had already like finished those requirements. So I was like, thanks. I just took the time off. Like after that semester that got cut in half, because it was right around our spring break when, you know, the lockdown and stuff started. I just took some time off and I just worked full time at a grocery store making money. But like stuff like that, like, I mean, it's just a really expensive school. And they're not going to help you out really when it comes to funding.
I mean, you portray a really good music student, Tyler, and I know you. I've been with you in the music class, and I know that you probably were also doing good in your first year undergrad, and you still got some scholarships. And at the end, with all the loans, you are still paying $45,000 a year. So that's crazy.
It's a lot of money. It's probably gone up now too. I would imagine it's over 50,000.
Are you aware of people, especially Europeans, making like? I mean, there are so many people outside of US thinking that college in US is just a joke right now. Like it's almost like pay to study.
I mean, it's almost beyond parody. Like I think like it. I keep thinking as tuition goes higher and higher and it becomes more exploitative and more exploitative, I keep thinking like it's going to get to a point where like the only people that can afford to go to college are like rich people, you know, like the upper middle class and like upper class. Like those are the only people that are going to be able to afford going to school. And I keep thinking like we're going to get to a point where the system breaks and like nobody goes to college because they can't afford it. And then eventually they'll have to lower the prices and there's going to be this big revolution. But it keeps going higher and it keeps going higher and it keeps going higher. And like I don't know where that point is. Like I don't know how far off we are from that point, but like it's bad. And it's not just music. I mean,
Yeah.
it's college and it's just so, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's going to get any better. Like, I mean, I'm not particularly in favor for like a ton of regulation from the government or whatever, but like it's so exploitative that like somebody has to do something. And I mean,
Yeah.
like it goes to show that like, I mean, when Biden was still in office, a big part of his policy was he wanted to do uh, loan forgiveness for students. So he sent out checks and he forgave student loans for people that had college debt. And people in America were like, "This is socialism. This sucks." Well, he's just giving handouts to people. I paid my college. People were upset about it. Like it's such. I mean, it's like we have a serious cultural problem over it, and like he barely was able to get money out because people in the House and Senate were trying to shoot it down. It's just like
Crazy.
I don't see it getting like there's not going to be any relief coming from the government, especially not now. There's not going to be any relief coming from the government side of things where there really needs to be. Because I mean, like education, I mean, the United States, I think, is so globally dominant in culture and arts and science and whatnot because education here has been so strong, but not at like the lower level education. I think we actually really struggle at that. But like our universities are world renowned.
Yeah.
Yeah, our Ivy
That's right.
people come from all over the world to study here, and
Yeah.
like who's going to come now if they can't afford it? So like Berkeley is not exempt from that. They're not immune to that problem. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and like I wouldn't go there to get a songwriting degree. I just don't think it's worth it for that. Like, I probably wouldn't go there to do performance. Like, I wouldn't graduate as a performer there probably. So, when going back to your question of like, what is Berkeley good at? Like, why is it so high? Things like I mentioned, resources there are really
I mean,
strong.
by the way, that wasn't my question. My question was like, who would you suggest to go and study there?
Well, let me start by saying who I wouldn't suggest. I wouldn't, if you know that you want to do composition, Berkeley is, I don't think, the place to go. Boston Conservatory, I think, is much better. Another thing, one quick note, when it comes to private lessons, I think one of the most important things for a composer is one-on-one private lessons. That routine, working with somebody, getting feedback. At Berkeley, you get half an hour a week or an hour every 2 weeks. It's half as much. Like if you go to Manus and you do your undergrad, you're getting a full hour every week with like Timo or Chris Cerrone, But at
Or
Berkeley,
Lowell.
exactly. But at Berkeley, half an hour. And in jazz composition, you get a half an hour a week in your last semester. That's it. And then all the rest is like classes, arranging classes, harmony classes, that sort of thing. So it's just like, I mean, and part of that, I mean, I imagine that that's not how it's always been. It's part of the strain of like, there's just so many people there. Like they're not adding a ton of new faculty. They are expanding faculty, but a lot of the faculty that they're bringing on are like adjunct professors that they bring on to teach like theory and counterpoint stuff. Like they're not bringing on as many private instructors, and so you just don't get as much time. So I wouldn't recommend it for classical composition, maybe for jazz composition, maybe if you are somebody that wants to produce an album and you have the means to find people to be an entrepreneur and go meet people and make stuff happen. That's a good place to go. If you want to produce an album, if you want to be a producer, or if you're a performer, songwriter that wants to do that, that's the place to go because they have, like I said, a lot of resources, a lot of great players. If you want to form a band, it's a place to go. But for our side of things, for the classical, like don't go there for a classical piano performance. Don't do it. It's just not a classical conservatory. There's so many better cheap. I mean, go to Manus, honestly. If you're a classical pianist, I would go to Manus over Berkeley any day of the week.
And as far as I know, Manus provides really good scholarships for classical pianists.
Yeah, I mean, like again, it's something where like the sticker price is somewhere around like 45,000 a year, something like that. But almost nobody that goes there is paying that. I mean, most people are paying half. Like I'm paying less than half to go there. It's great. Like I pretty much between what I get in scholarships and then what I get in the loans, it's pretty much completely covered. Which is just like as a artist, that's just so important. Berkeley, like you're gonna get slapped with a huge bill at Berkeley unless you know how to game the system. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it for like most people, but if you want to start a band, If you want to record an album, if you want to be a producer, if you want to do film scoring, just depends on what you want to do.
At this point in my life, you said that they were bringing adjunct professors all the time to teach counterpoint or whatever. I have a professor here. I'm really close to him. Like we are simply friends and we talk a lot. And I ask him so many questions all the time. He has graduated from the Vienna Conservatory and he had a bunch of awards. Like he is literally like one of the best Turkish composers alive. At some point, I asked him, "Is there anything that you are teaching right now? Is there anything that people cannot find on internet and learn by themselves?" He said, "No, people can learn anything I teach from internet or books, like simply." Yeah, it's sad.
I think, I think that's true. I mean,
And I also believe that the only really beneficial thing about music schools, especially in our area, like if you want to compose something like classical music or between avant-garde and classical, post-tonal, whatever, I think the best thing music school provides and should be providing is the environment. For example, the sources like Jack Quartet, like Manastas, and orchestral reading, and the one-on-one private lessons. I think these should be the main focuses. Like after some point, you are not really learning much, but you are literally squeezing everything out of the school. Like you have to be extremely selfish to study music, I believe. So
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the rigor and the class structure. Like, a lot of the classes here are very chill. You show up because it's not really what it's about. I mean, you can go through academia and have a 4.0 and be very good at doing assignments and tests and stuff. And then when you graduate, you were very good at assignments and tests and you have a piece of paper that says so. And that doesn't really matter. What matters are recordings.
exactly.
Honestly. Matters is the experience that you gain in private lessons and stuff.
Since we are talking in a really big picture and we are covering, I think, so many stuff, I'm gonna ask really small questions about, for example, what do you think makes a great composer in this century? And how can we understand if someone is good or not? Like, for example, do you think composition competitions matter, commissions matter, or just the technique or the art itself matters and that's the only thing? What do you think makes a good composer?
I don't really know. I think
I know that there is not one answer to this. I'm literally, I just want to know your opinion.
good composers that don't really find that much success, and there's a lot of not so good composers that find a lot of success. So I don't really know that success is a metric by which to measure whether a composer is a good composer. But I mean, at the end of the day, does it really matter whether or not you're good if you're successful? Again, it would matter to me, but I mean, I would sell out to be successful probably. Just being honest, to get like worldwide fame. But I don't know. I mean, there's a certain level of artistry and craft that I think is required, but it's hard to pin that down and exactly define it. Like what exactly is artistry and craft, and like how do you measure that? I don't really know. I mean, when I listen to something, I'm at the point now where I've listened to enough music and I've written enough music that I can listen to something with a very critical lens and I can judge its merit based on the craft. When I listen to, new music, or I listen to music written by my colleagues and stuff, I'm at a point where I can kind of, when I'm listening, like look under the hood and see, how much thought was really put into this. I mean, you can write something that sounds very good, but
Sounds good.
you can write beautiful music that doesn't really have a deeper meaning. I think it's some sort of combination of writing something, creating an interesting sound world,
Yeah.
and also contextualizing that in a meaningful and profound way. It doesn't necessarily matter what you say. What matters is how you say it. And there's some people that are very good at that, very articulate, and they just kind of have a sound, they have a voice. And there's some people that don't, and they're trying to find it. Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find the voice, but that's a very generic way of saying that I'm trying to write music that on the very surface level is interesting and sounds good. Not necessarily good, but it sounds interesting, intriguing. Colorful, unique. But then like these colorful, unique, interesting sounds are part of something that's more meaningful. It's a case of the thing being greater than the sum of its parts. I think that's very important. When I listen to somebody like Tchaikovsky, to take it way back, he's a guy where like all the surface level stuff is like awesome. Like he writes great melodies, he writes great tunes, but underneath it, he's not very good at developing them, to be honest with you. Like the development sections of his symphonies are a little bit, I wouldn't say boring, but when he's so gifted at writing these elaborate, well thought out melodies, melodies that when he goes to develop them, there's like not really much more development to be done. Versus somebody like Mahler, like his music is development. Like there's not really a moment where his music stops developing. Very few of his works, include, copy and paste repeat sections. Like it's kind of all constantly evolving. He writes in a way where the surface level is very profound, sounds very, sometimes beautiful, sometimes absolutely filled with despair, but the inner workings are also very, very interesting. He's somebody that, like, I think there's a lineage from him, from Beethoven to him, where like the form is just very, very profound. There's something being said that means a lot there. And the challenge is to find a way to do that outside of, 19th century tonal music. Because like there's a lot of people that will write that way now. Like the neo-romanticism is kind of, a thing. There's some people at Manus that are doing that, where they're just like, screw it, I'm just going to write 18th century or 19th century classical music. I don't think that's not music that excites me as much. I think the challenge is figuring out how to capture that in some sort of different new realization. And there's people that I think are really good at it, and there's people that I don't.
Have you ever searched about what makes you feel good or what makes you think that something is good, like on a neurological level?
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that a lot. I think it comes back to my like core philosophy of music. Because what really attracts me about music is the fact that as an art form, it is the most abstract form of expression that there is. Like, you think about visual art or film, theater, musical theater, dance. Like these are all art forms that deal very heavily in like the concrete. Like there's a painting behind me. It's of a backyard, This is something that's very concrete. I think the visual artists of, the post-war era tried their best to get, like the de Koonings, the Rothkos, the Pollocks. People tried their best to step into the abstract and convey emotion and the human experience in a way that was free from these associations, like the associations to the tangible world, like, a lamp or a street or something like that. Music lives in that world, and sometimes the music's attempt is to like make connections with the tangible world because it just is so divorced from like, you can talk, we have words for describing what's behind me right now, but like describe in one sentence, what is like a major chord, so some words come to mind like, oh, it's bright, it's happy. I've heard a lot of major chords that are not happy, dude. I've heard a lot of major chords that are dark. And even in that, our best, the best we can do with the English language, or any language, the best we can do with a verbal language to express things about it are we use these somewhat arbitrary associations. Like, we say a piccolo is high, or we say that, the E string on the violin is bright, but music doesn't occupy space. It can't physically be high. The music doesn't emit light. It's not bright. These are attempts for us to like try to describe this. And there's a term for this. It's hermeneutics, using language to try to define things that defy definition. And so that to me is the greatest strength of music. Twofold. It's onefold that it's, incredibly abstract, and in its abstraction, it's universal. Like, doesn't matter what language you speak, doesn't matter, you can be blind.
Yeah.
And you can still feel something very profound from listening that's completely different from how anybody else listens to it. That's very important to me. And also it exists in time. It exists, in this fourth dimension. That's something that like visual art doesn't. I think some of the very, very profound mediums of expression exist in time because it just adds a dramatic layer that is just so profound. So it's the marriage of those two things, the abstraction and the fact that it's a drama that exists in time. That's what really excites me. So music that leans into that is what I really like. Going back to like older composers that I like I mentioned Mahler, he's a guy that like he lives in the world of the abstract, where like he'll write a funeral march where like we have these associations of what a funeral march is, but the way that he handles that material, he twists it and manipulates it in such an abstract way that by the end of it, it's like what even is a funeral march anymore? And then the scope of his works and how he takes you on like this just epic journey. he's one of my favorite composers of all time because I think he's so good at both of those things. Like Beethoven as well. Like you talk about form, like man, one of the first to like completely explode form. These are people that really excite me.
18th century is form. 18th century is the fundamentals of structure in music simply.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's like you're talking, I mean, when you think about like Clementi and Scarlatti, like a lot of these forms are being, and then Haydn, a lot of these forms like sonata form are being established at that time,
Yeah.
And then the lengths of works started to get a lot longer. Like when you talk about Mozart's later symphonies, I mean you're done in like under 20 minutes usually. And then Beethoven was like, no, we're going to be here for an hour basically. Like, 400, 500 measures plus, just completely exploded the scale. I mean, that's the romantic era for you in a nutshell. But that, I mean, so I think that there's finding a way to do that without leaning on tonal music or without leaning on these older forms of expression is what I'm really interested in. I mean, I really like Sariaho because I think she was very, very good at like handling this abstract and finding new ways and new textures to have the surface level be very profound and interesting. And sometimes, though, I have problems with her form. Like her form, to me, it's hard to write textural music because, like, when you're writing music that's very harmonically grounded with, tonic dominant polarity, for example, form becomes very easy. It becomes very easy to delineate this sound from this sound. But when you're dealing with texture music, form has to be governed by texture, and that's a hard thing to do. And I think she's successful at it most of the time. But there's some times where I'm lost because I'm hearing a lot of cool cool sounds, but I'm not really sure, what the thematic importance of that is.
Like when you think about it, do you end up thinking that if it matters,
If it matters, if there's important
thematic
form.
form or not? Yeah.
I mean, so like take a guy like Takamitsu, like his music is profoundly complex and intricate and at times very beautiful and evocative, but at the same time it's so static. Like so much of his music doesn't go anywhere because he stays in the same kind of harmonic zone the entire time. I mean, it's like a Zen garden composition where you invite the listener into your Zen garden and you say like, well, here's the rock. Like we'll walk around the rock and we're going to look at the rock from different angles. And then we're going to go over here and look at this, bonsai tree, and we're going to look at it from different angles and discover these different things about it. But we never leave the Zen garden. Like, you're free to like walk around and, discover stuff in different lights, but it's all within, the confines of this garden. Whereas like somebody like Beethoven or Mahler is like, we're going to go on a long journey. You're going to leave home. You're going to forget about it for a while, but eventually we're going to come back. So I really like Takamitsu. So that's an example of somebody that succeeds so well in like another area where the form is not so important. Sometimes I feel like that with Insukchin, although I think for the most part her forms are very, very concrete.
So you are always looking for something like a scenario storytelling, an interesting way of storytelling, right? This is what makes you think that some music is good, right?
Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah, generally.
I think it's important for any form of art that occupies time. Like,
You know what? I agree with you, but I didn't hear anything.
how is it not going to be a story? When there's a beginning, middle, and
Oh
end,
yeah,
like already, like we're talking about form. I mean, any time that you do something that exists in the medium of time, there's going to be a form no matter what. So how much care you give to it,
what interests me about like almost any type of music, that what really mesmerizes me. I think I kind of lost on the technical level, other than the storytelling itself and motifs and melodies or the texture in general. I catch myself really shocked and really really excited in times when I recognize that there is some really good rhythmical or harmonical variations or like really fast changes in music. But like this is also part of storytelling too. I know that. But like there's a really big technical work behind, and seeing that and realizing that what makes me really happy and what I think is good about what I label as good, let's say. For
Yeah.
example, I believe that's the only reason. I wasn't aware of this reason back then, but right now I think this is the reason. I studied heavily Second Viennese School in my late undergrad. It's crazy that we were forced to listen to the Futurism movement. I forgot the guy who wrote the Futurist Manifesto. Do you know that? I mean, we were like at the age of 18, 19, we were literally forced to listen to really atonal, abstract, avant-garde music in Bilgi University in Turkey. And actually, after some point, that education made its graduate students some kind of a narcissistic fox. I can say that because like when you are forced to analyze in your third year of undergrad Ferniho, like yeah, you don't like stuff. Like you think that everything is boring, everything is so easy, everything is so basic, and you think that you simply completed the area of composition, the whole music. But like until you go out of it and see the other world, like different approaches in the world, you will never find a composer who is so interested and happy to talk about music like you in Turkey or Europe, probably. Yeah.
I think you just have to have the mindset that, not all music can do everything. Like there's a number of different things the music can do,
Yeah.
but music, like a piece of music can't do everything at once. And so, I mean, part of being a good composer and being a good musician is deciding what you want to do,
Yeah.
and then deciding ways to make that felt in the final product. But you can't do everything. I mean, like Takemitsu is an example of a guy that decided, like, I'm going to focus more on the intimacy of the moment, and I'm going to try to expand a moment rather than working on contextualizing that moment in, going away in a point of departure. And it's very effective music. I mean, some people don't like it. I have conversations with Timo about this sometimes.
You study with Timo, right?
Yeah, I'm with him now. I'm going to be with Cerrone next year, but yeah, I'm coming up on completing 1 year in Timo's studio, and he's a guy like he, like me, is very, very interested in form. I think that's his chief concern: form and then harmony. I mean, I think form and harmony are very closely related, but those are his, like, that's what he values at the forefront. And so the music that he likes, like, he loves Beethoven. We like talk about Beethoven a lot because we
I
talk
mean,
about
who doesn't? I don't know anyone who doesn't like Beethoven.
like Beethoven. I don't particularly get it. I feel like Beethoven is such like a composer's composer,
Yeah.
but and like a performer's composer too. I think he's a guy that's, I don't think he's overrated, but I think he's a little bit overperformed. Like every major concert hall will do like multiple Beethoven symphonies a year. And I think like if we all just took like a year off of Beethoven, then when, like, if you started doing Beethoven again, you'd be like, oh wow, this is what we were Beethoven, but like every year it's like, oh, Beethoven 5, Beethoven 7, Beethoven, you get, like, it's almost like you take it for granted because it's just people hear it so
Yeah.
much. And then I think also like Beethoven, my ideal like programming of Beethoven is like you do a piece by like Mozart or Haydn or some classical composer before him, and then you do a Beethoven symphony to show just like what Beethoven did, like really exemplify how revolutionary he was. Because I think a lot of people that listen to him, like, they don't
Yeah.
realize how incredibly influential he was. But anyways, I mean, so Timo and I mean, like, we both connect over form, and so we have a lot of conversation about Beethoven. We were talking about his A flat piano sonata and like how that relates to form, and it's just so fluid. So like that's something that he and I both really like, and that's important to us. I talked to him about Takemitsu, who's a guy that I also really like, and he's like, I just don't. He doesn't. His form doesn't excite me. That's the beauty of music, is that everybody has different tastes. I don't like it. It goes back to what I said. It doesn't matter at the end of the day which way you decide to go. What matters is how you execute it.
Yeah. At the end, almost always you are pleasing yourself with your music simply.
Yeah, I mean, you're the first layer of the audience. If you don't write music that you believe in, then nobody else is going to believe in it. So yeah, I think you have to have an open mind too. I mean, from what I've been to Europe a decent amount and done like master classes and festivals and stuff over there, and talked to composers there, and they seem to have a very narrow idea of what contemporary music should be, and they're very fast to just ignore or discount like American minimalism, which is like, I mean, like, doesn't matter what you think about it. It's a very profound movement
Can
in general.
can you name the conservatories? Like you think that
I did. Well, these are mostly festivals that I did. I did one in France it was called the Zodiac Festival. That one was like, there was French and I think a Polish people, like faculty, were putting it on. That was in Côte d'Azur. It was in Nice in France. And it was mostly like there was 4 composers there, and then the rest were student performers. And so I wrote a piece that got a premiere, and I worked with student performers. So I got rehearsals. All the other festivals that I've been to, it's been like an ensemble in residency. Like I did one in Vienna called the Vienna Contemporary Composers Festival, VCCF. They had readings and performances with the Face Ensemble, which is like a chamber group in Vienna, and Mivos. Mivos Quartet. So that was one I did. And then there were a lot, that festival had like every day there were lectures and master classes with composers from Austria, from the Conservatory in Vienna, the Conservatory in Graz as well, and then Paris Conservatory. Some people came over, someone from Belgium came. So that was the main one where I a lot of European composers, and they all had they spoke very disparagingly of like American music. And they were all trying to convince me to come study in Europe because they were like, you don't want to get ruined by the American music. Really? Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm a guy that like I really like minimalism, honestly. I don't think that I'm a minimalist composer, but like when you talk about form, like minimalism is such a breath of fresh air with regards to form. Like nobody did anything like that. All those guys like Terry Riley's, Reich, Glass, like these guys, Lamont, nobody was doing anything like that. It was completely fresh. And I mean, it goes back to like there's always been kind of like a rivalry. I mean, back to like the perception of like Cage versus Boulez, like the American idea of, chance music and aleatory versus the Boulezian, very, very strict, narrow understanding of what elitist understanding of what music could be. And then the funny thing is like Cage was writing a lot of chance music. Boulez was writing heavily serialized music, like basically completely serialized where like dynamics, articulation, everything is serialized. They're going so far in the opposite direction that they meet. Basically, a lot of Boulez's music sounds like random chance music because he's serialized so much of the process that it's basically like running on its own. And then Cage is arriving at the same thing by just saying, let's roll the dice and see what happens. So the irony there is that like they're very similar, but they're so in their mental conception of what they're doing are so different that they hated each other by the end of their lives.
What do you think about people who think that Cage is all fraud?
I mean, like I've read like European people.
But there are a bunch of in America too, by the way.
Oh, I mean, like I think
I mean, I'm a fan of John Cage, by the way. I'm a huge fan. So I find it crazy that people don't see anything interesting in his music. It's crazy.
I mean, like, you can find people saying ridiculous stuff about pretty much anybody. Schenker, we were talking about Schenkerian analysis. He was a guy that like really valued Mahler as a conductor, but thought he was not a very good composer at all. He was like an incredibly respected music analyst and like widely read, revolutionized the way that we thought about theory. And like he was just like, yeah, Mahler kind of sucks writing music.
You don't put Mahler in the Cage in the same basket, right?
In some ways, I do. In
Oh
some
yeah?
ways, in Cage, I think that like a lot of people get really upset by something like 433.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, that's just like completely ridiculous. But I think he was a guy that had a really, really interesting and profound philosophy of music. And I think that it comes through in a lot of his work. I mean, like his prepared piano stuff, just incredible. His like string quartet, like solo violin writing, just
And
phenomenal.
also, before he has gone crazy with chance music, I think he was still so interesting with like how diatonal, how tonal he was. I mean, even the times he was tonal, I think it was still interesting. By the way, he studied at Manos or taught at Manos, as far as I know,
A little bit. Yeah, he lectured.
right?
Yeah. Just an incredible human being, honestly. Revolutionary. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think like in classical music, in the world of classical music, there's like it's like a competition of ego. And so you can almost measure somebody's success by like how much people were talking trash about them during their life. Like I mean, some of the best composers were just, absolutely hated by people that were at the end of the day very similar to them, just like slightly disagreed and like the finer trappings of what they were trying to do. But I mean,
I think the problem is people think that they are so important. I think that's the only issue, by the way. Like none of us are that important. Like you don't have to take everything this serious, man. Just let it be. Like
yeah, it's I mean, like the whole idea of the artist is like a revenant, like this, outcast from society, this, crazy artistic, wild personality. I mean, it popularized, in the beginning of the Romantic period and kind of stuck. And with regards to like a lot of different artistic disciplines, like visual artists to the starving artist, the tragic artist, the idea that like people who suffer, right, create better art, that sort of thing. Like all of these things contribute to the artist's personality. Ego is a very big part of it.
Just recently, there was a woman she's 45. She said like I wanna take piano lessons from you. I said, all right, what do you want to do? Like what do you expect from this? And she said, I just want to learn. Just teach me. I don't have any like specific ideas. I like to press these keys and make sound simply. So during our first class, she said I wasn't expecting something like this. Like I was so scared. I thought it was extremely hard. I thought I was gonna suffer. I thought like it's all about talent. I'm like, no, you just practice and it gets better. Like, don't put too much meaning into it. Just,
Yeah,
especially like with performing. Like, you are an athlete simply. You are simply an athlete, and you have to practice the technique, and you'll get better.
yeah. Yeah, it's not that deep.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Also, I mean, like you scale your efforts to what you want out of it. A lot of people can get a lot of meaning from just like participating in something or like, picking up a guitar and like learning a song that they like. And for a lot of people, the meaning that they get out of it is by taking it all the way to the end and like, becoming a marathon runner essentially to run with the athlete metaphor. But yeah, you have to put in what you expect to get out. And if there's too much of an imbalance in either direction, then you'll be miserable in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans of like getting back into academia, like in Turkey or in another art? What's your plan?
You know what? During my 5 months in US, all the passion and my thrive for success, being a good academician, pianist, composer, and everything, it got literally sucked out of me. And I don't really want to blame it on the system, but Tyler, I was extremely tired all the time, and it affected me as a human being and as a composer, as an artist in every negative way possible. Like I couldn't compose at that time. I couldn't compose. I mean, I was practicing piano, but it wasn't that efficient. Like the times where I'm not where I can be at the in the moment. It wasn't that efficient. So right now I'm just chilling. I meditate every day. I do cardio. I simply focused on my mental health and overall health. I'm making money as a piano teacher right now. So probably like in this year, I'm just gonna chill for a bit. Then
Good idea. I mean, I was in your same place after I finished my undergrad. Like I did the dual major and I had these two portfolios, and it was just like it was so much writing music, and I just got completely burned out. It was during the pandemic as well, so I just like all of the passion that I had, and the things that made me get into it were just I couldn't see them anymore. And I took 2 years living in LA, going to the beach, teaching piano like you're doing right now, going camping, skiing, just kind of like enjoying being young and like not really caring about stuff. It was like the best thing that happened to me. And then by the end of it, I had that hunger to get back into it, and I felt like my batteries were recharged. So now I'm back in academia, and I think I'm more efficient than I ever would have been if I'd gone directly into it. So I mean, like it's very important to just take some time for yourself. And like,
how old are you?
I'm 26.
98, 99?
98, yeah.
I'm literally living your life 2 years behind, simply.
Is that right?
Yeah, I'm 2000. I was born in 2000.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had a 2 years gap between my undergrad and Amanos, but even that 2 years gap, I was still working so hard. It was the time I was constantly giving piano lessons and completing my yoga teacher training, and like it has also, it's just like a school. Like you study the philosophy, you study the yoga poses, you study how to teach, how to lead a class, and you
I've,
got,
I've
sorry.
done it. I've done yoga before. It's very hard. It's very
Oh,
complicated.
yeah, so yeah, and the all of the visa, getting an appointment and getting all the documentation ready. I mean, I wasn't a student in that 2 years or two-year gap, but it was still really tiring. So yeah, this is the time I'm chilling right now. And you know what, the really bad thing about it, I still feel guilty that I'm not an active student. I don't completely feel like, okay, I deserve this right now. I have to chill for a bit. I'm still not like that, and it still bothers me. It's always there. Like there's a voice all the time saying that you should have to work harder. You are losing. Like every second matters.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I was like, I'm just wasting away here in California, not pursuing my career. I'm getting older, and it's the path for me to like get a full-time position doing what I want, or like getting any level of success is not, I'm not proceeding down it whatsoever. And I'm just kind of like using up space and money and time. But I mean, the meditation and just like doing stuff that you like is so helpful because I don't know, life is way too short to like always be thinking about things like this, you know? I mean, you're gonna look back at this time and be like, man, I should have just relaxed more. Because like you have so much time later in your life to like be concerned about these things. Like, you know, you're what, 24?
Yeah, 25 in August.
Yeah, dude, so young, you know. I'm still very young. Like this stuff just like doesn't matter as much as we think it does.
It's funny that we are talking about it right now, like we haven't mentioned that we are not that important. Like,
Yeah. At the end of the day, like if either one of us like just left music or left academia altogether, like wouldn't really matter, you know. The only person that would matter to is us. Like if we're able to be happy doing something else, you know, then it would be a net positive. But yeah.
nice to hear from you that you got out of it with a full battery and passion again. Because I still think that I will never ever go back to academia ever again. But like I don't think it ends like this, right?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I didn't know. I was in your position and I didn't know what I was gonna do. I just think like by the time I got to this end of the second year, I felt like I was either gonna be at like a private lesson piano teacher for the rest of my life, or I was going to go back, or I was going to do something else. And I was pretty sure that I didn't want to do something else. Music was something that I was very, very certain that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And, you know, I could have made pretty good money, been comfortable doing, you know, teaching, you know, 6-year-olds the C major scale, you know. I was pretty good at it. Like I'm, you know, pretty chill guy in general. I get along with kids, you know, like all my students loved me. I felt fulfilled at least in like creating this environment for these kids to be creative and getting them interested in music and showing them wacky stuff and just getting their feedback on it and, you know, just exposing them to things. Having conversations about music and art was very fulfilling in that regard, but there was something that was missing. And like, I mean, it manifests itself in different ways. Like you talk about, you have this feeling in the back of your mind, like you're missing out on something. That feeling got stronger the longer I did it. And I realized I don't want to do this for the rest of my life, at least not like by itself. Like, I mean, there's a
Mm.
part of me that will always love teaching young kids because they come with such a freshness and excitement that is lost, unfortunately, along the way in a lot of people. But at the same time, like there's something incredibly, you know, mentally stimulating to me about understanding the intricacies of harmony and analysis and, you know, the complexities of classical music that was just like so far removed from what I was doing. Like I wasn't even touching that when I was teaching there, and I just missed it. Like I needed it. I would do stuff on my own time, but like when I'm analyzing, you know, Beethoven or whatever for myself, it just doesn't have the same feeling. And at a certain point that I realized I had like a decision to make. If I stayed there for much longer, I was going to get comfortable and that was probably going to be my life. And I just didn't want to do that. I also like I get tired of living in one place or doing one thing for too long, and I need to like switch things up, like move to a new city, you know, try something else. And I had exhausted my time in LA, and I realized that it was time to move on. So I applied to a number of places and decided to move to New York because I'd always kind of considered it. So yeah, that could happen for you. You know, I don't know. It probably doesn't look exactly like, you know,
Let's
how it looks, but for you, there will probably be a point where you realize that you have a decision to make, and your decision will be influenced by what you really want and what brings you fulfillment, and what you know you don't want. So
yeah, time will show.
yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's not something that, you know, happens overnight. And I think like 1, 2, 3 years of just sort of living, you know, like people ask you all the time, like, what are you doing? Like, what do you want to be? Like, what's your, you just
You're
answer
like,
it.
I don't know. Like let me live.
Hard enough to like get out of bed in the morning. Like, I'm doing pretty good at that. So honestly, you know,
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. It was nice. It was nice learning from you.
thanks. So always good to talk to you. Don't be a stranger. Let's stay in touch.
I liked it.
Later, brother.